I'm going to call the city council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Councilor Weber. Here. Councilor Mo. Here. Councilor Rodney. Here. Councilor Blackwell. Here. Councilor Doyle. Here. We have them here.
Here. With that go. We have two items for the work session tonight. The first is an update on the implementation of climate friendly and equitable communities rules making process. I'm sure that comes to a nice acronym someplace. But Sandy?
Good evening. My name is Sandy Belson. I'm a comprehensive planning manager for the city. And I was last before you in February, although we have a new member since then. But the Land Conservation and Development Commission passed rules last summer that are called the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Rules. The purpose of these rules generally is to reduce carbon emitted by vehicles and to increase equity during community engagement when providing housing and transportation choices. So these rules are include wide-ranging requirements for metropolitan areas that affect community engagement, land use, and transportation. So first update is that there has been ongoing rulemaking. The commission passed temporary rules in April to address some of the issues that have come up, and they've also convened are convening another rules advisory committee to assist in some permanent rulemaking. The temporary rules are good for 6 months. So if those are going to stay in place, they need to become permanent. And so they'll look at those, making those permanent and expand their scope to address some other topics. It's unclear yet whether they will go beyond just corrections and clarifications and address some of the more underlying issues, but we'll stay informed and keep you up to date. So in terms of actual implementation for parking, we have tentatively scheduled a joint public hearing between the Springfield Planning Commission and the Lane County Planning Commission on August 1st. I'm going to then skip next to scenario planning, which is the last topic I brought up, but you had provided some direction previously in terms of the governance structure for the scenario planning. And so for that scenario planning, we're using a plan that our region had developed in 2015. We're going to need to develop some performance measures. And so you had given your input, and we're looking to have the Metropolitan Planning Committee serve as that governance structure with the addition of Coburg in that role. So there'll be some changes to the bylaws. But MPC did agree to that at their last meeting. So we're putting that forth in our work program for the scenario planning as the proposed governance structure. And then coming next to climate friendly areas, these rules require that Springfield designate areas where people can do meet most of their daily needs without having to drive. So these are intended to be urban mixed use areas with a greater than average mix of housing, jobs, businesses at higher densities that are served by a multimodal transportation network. So we are looking to align these areas in places that align with our already adopted policies. So we looked at urban centers, multimodal areas, and downtown. Looked at our current transportation network, and then we're going to exclude areas that are harder to develop, so those in the floodway or in steep slope areas. So Allison, do you want to share that map now? There are 3 areas that we're going to look at for consideration. So these 3 areas are Riverbend area of Gateway, downtown, and Glenwood waterfront. So we'll start analyzing those 3 areas more in depth, and then ultimately come back to you for an idea of which ones do we want to designate as climate friendly areas. As part of this climate friendly area process, bringing in the equitable communities aspect of the rules. We're going to be doing a displacement analysis to determine if there are any historically marginalized communities that we need to be aware of to take measures either to not designate those communities areas as climate friendly areas or have a way to mitigate for any potential displacement. So in preparing for the outreach, we created some draft key messages and those are in your pocket. So also look for your input or questions about those key messages. And that with that, I will stop talking and be available to answer questions or take input on anything I've shared.
Corey?
First, thank you. I always appreciate the update as we're moving through this. I'm curious as to how you all got to those 3 areas. I have a little bit of a bias for like Centennial Mohawk area because I think that there's, you got a hospital, you're really close to like grocery and all of that. So I'm just curious as to how you came up with those 3 instead of other areas.
Sure. So the Mohawk area you're talking about is designated and zoned nodal development. So we did include that initially. The drawback there is that it's not on a frequent transit network, even though there are 3 bus lines that serve it, 13, 17, and 18. It's not at the frequency that we have of the frequent transit network like Route 11 or the MX. So that's why it has dropped off at this point.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Could you clear, like with climate friendly areas, it's 30% of our housing needs over 20 years?
Current and future for the next 20 years need to fit within the zoned area.
So roughly, when we look at the maps, how many additional housing units do we think we would be putting into the orange areas?
So I have that in the previous packet, what our number of housing units is, because I'm not remembering that. But I will try to come up with that. But it's kind of a academic exercise in that we're not taking into consideration what's already there. It's the zone capacity. So it's as if nothing's there. How much could you fit within it? And it's pretty prescribed in terms of the height that we would have to allow, that the dwelling units would be 900 square feet, that 30% of the floor within those buildings would be residential. So assuming 70% something that's not residential. And that's one of the things that we'll be calculating through these next processes, is to see how big of an area we would need to accommodate our 30%.
And that way, that's naturally going to size like the blobs, if you will.
Right. I mean, there's much more area here than what we're going to need.
Okay.
And whether we'll end up with 1 blob or 1 blob with 1 or other sort of smaller blobs is yet to be seen.
You
mentioned transportation is a limitation. And I think one of our goals should be trying to figure out some way to expand that transportation availability to the rest of the city. We're going to have bikes, bikes and that nature, but buses, for the rest of the city, we don't have it. And that should be one of our goals out there someplace.
Well, we are going to be working with Lane Transit District in the scenario planning. They will be one of the key partners that we'll be working with.
Yeah, MPOC, whatever it is, it's got millions of dollars out there for buses. No money for bus drivers. That's what we did. We don't have enough money to drive it.
Victoria?
I know that Lane Transit, I spoke with the director last week. And he was saying that he would like very much to have some time with the council to come in and do an update and just kind of talk to us and get questions from us about what some of those concerns or goals or whatever are. And so that's something maybe we could just put that in the out there in the ether. Did you look at all further out, like Thurston area where like the bus transfer station is and the Albertsons and like that area right on I-126 and all of that? I didn't know.
We did not,
Okay.
because we don't have any nodal development areas there. So because we were trying to align with existing adopted policy.
Gotcha.
We only looked at areas that we had designated for nodal development, or in the case of Glenwood, the multimodal areas.
And then is any of this affected by the lawsuit information, that lawsuit stuff we've got going on? And we just have to work, we just keep working like it's.
Just working through two parallel tracks right now.
Okay, just keeping on until the, okay, all right, that's all I wanted, thank you. Oh, I did have one more question, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
On the equity portion, I looked and it said, about the process that they're gonna be looking. The city will center the voices of historically marginalized communities, particularly those who have been harmed by past planning, climate, and transportation decisions, and that the city conducted a series of interviews with key community leaders. Can you speak a little more to that? Like, tell me who you talked to and what we're kind of talking about there? I'm not.
Sure, that's the update that I provided in February, where we listed the people that we had talked with and some of the key findings from that. So
I can go back and look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
that's okay.
Other questions? Okay, I guess two other quick things. Obviously, you know, when you think about these areas, you know, my preference is to continue to get as much of that in Glenwood and downtown as possible, right? Because that's historically where we planned a lot more of our high density residential to go. On the messaging itself, like the messages seemed like conceptually fine, but I would, before we put this out or use this as talking points, I really would love to have it turned into, you know, either a handout or just go through maybe one more iteration to make it more approachable from a language perspective, right? Like it reads like a planning document to me. And then I guess the last comment about the temporary rules, and this was my take from the last time the commission met, is there's going to be a set of changes that come in the fall, right? And so, and then when the commission talked, it seemed like there was an understanding that there may be another set of changes that come out in January, you know, that they start in January, February, and that for the next couple of years that their plan would be to iterate off of this a couple of times. And I guess I want to acknowledge that you know, we're trying to comply with rules that may or may not exist within the next, right? Like, and that's cost the Springfield taxpayers paying, opposed to, right, like, you know, that the state regulatory agency is still sort of changing. We're building the plane as we're flying it here, I guess is what I'm saying. And is there a real risk here that we may duplicate work?
I don't know.
Oh,
But I did find that other number.
okay, good. I stalled long enough.
So the climate friendly areas must be planned to accommodate 24,500 Springfield residents.
So that is a lot of people and not a very big space.
So by saying that, you're saying 24,000 in this area?
Probably a smaller area, yes.
A lot of people stack them up.
Yep.
That's what we need to do. I think
New York City, here we come.
that's the future.
I am open to looking for a place and, you know, if, you know, to looking at Mohawk a little bit closer, especially with how much space in the industrial are around the hospitals that you have. And, you know, in the old Wermar building, right, there's actually, you know, more space out there. And the last thing is you guys sort of size and talk through this. I just want to be conscientious to a lot of what's going on in Riverbend right now, right? Like there's a lot of space, but there's not a lot of clarity about, you know, whether or not that's going to be clinical buildings or whether or not there's going to be housing there. And I think we got to be aware of that as we design this. All right, Steve, go ahead.
These mandates are killing us financially. And I don't know what we can do to get funds for those, but they make us divert staff for these issues. And it takes away from servicing people. I don't like that, that's not right. Anyway, we can work on that.
Yes, well, I mean, it's the legislative process that determines the budget. There was no budget for this project in the governor's. And the governor included no money for implementation in her budget. So it will be up to the legislature to decide how much, if any, funds are available, at least to Department of Land Conservation and Development. ODOT does have some funding they have set aside. So they're moving forward with some contracts like with consultants and with Land Council of Governments, but none of ODOT's money is available to the city directly.
Yeah, mandates don't come through the legislature.
No,
What's the timeline for the project as far as, do you have to have a first? like,
so
then-
implementation has started, for instance, for parking already. We are not allowed to require any on-site parking within half a mile of BMX or Route 11 or for certain uses. Multi-family housing units are required to be ready for 40% of their on-site parking rather than just 20% as required by the building code. So those two phases are already implemented. It will take us up through 2029 to finish implementing everything.
Then we'll have more.
You think they're gonna wait till 2029 before they tell us to do more things? I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I really appreciate the update. I know that you're gonna be back in the next, probably in the fall to talk a little bit more about what's going on with this, because there's gonna be a lot of work around it the next couple of years. All right, thank you. All right. In the back.
Hot seat.
Right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Neil Obringer, Budget and Procurement Manager, Finance Department, here with Aaron Donnelly and Chris Carr from Sanapac. We're here tonight.
I'm recusing myself from this conversation.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're here tonight with the rate request from Sanapac. Basically a request to adjust the solid waste section of the master fees and charges schedule. So just to give a little background, the city has an exclusive franchise with Sanapac to provide solid waste collection services in Springfield. As part of that franchise agreement, it spells out basically the ability for Sanapac to request an annual rate adjustment. And then outlines a number of different factors that the city can use to evaluate any rate adjustment request. So staff has tried to provide some additional detail and background that the council hopefully will find helpful in evaluating the rate request from Sanapac. I won't go into any more details right now because we've got a short presentation from Sanapac. So I think what I'll do is turn it over to Aaron and Chris for the presentation, and hopefully we can have plenty of time for discussion.
Thanks, Neil. Thank you for having us. It's again, I'm Aaron Donnelly. I'm the municipal accounts manager of the Sanapac. And Chris Carr is our district manager, which is like our general manager. I've been the main contact for the city of Springfield now for probably close to 15 years. And it's been my privilege to work directly with staff and council. So but it did come up that we have a number of new counselors, so I thought maybe we could go through just briefly a number of slides here, just to talk about Sanapac service to the city, historic and sort of what we do. I'll make this quick. The printouts are in your handouts, so I don't need to probably cover everything, but there's just a little history here. We actually just had our 50th anniversary party last week. Thank you, Mayor Van Gordon, for attending that. It's great to see a lot of old drivers and old staff people come and a lot of my old friends. So we've actually serviced the city of Springfield in one variety or another since 1953. It used to be called Springfield Sanitary Service, and then there were a number of companies that came together, 4 of them, and that merged in 1973, called themselves Sanapak. Springfield Sanitary Service, essentially the franchise got passed down as that company called Sanapak. The only original founding member of Sanapak that's still alive was at our event. It's Garland Burbank. He owns Cottage Grove Sanitary. So he's been in the business since 1960. Anyway, in 2009, Sanapak was purchased by Waste Connections. So prior to that, I believe in 1980 or so, Pepe family bought Sanapak. In 2009, Waste Connections, so Waste Connections started in Vancouver, Washington in 1997. And it's primarily just grew from there out of the Pacific Northwest and is now all across the United States. It's the 3rd largest garbage company in the United States right now. We still have a very heavy presence in Oregon, in Washington. My understanding is we probably have the most employees with garbage companies in Oregon. So, but it's a decentralized corporate model. So local purchasing and local business decisions are primarily made here at the district with Chris. It's a strong district manager model. So Chris gets to sort of call the shots. And we keep the names of all the companies and try and keep the culture of those companies. So there's probably a lot of companies that you may have heard of that service a lot of cities in Oregon that are actually Waste Connections companies. We service Florence and Coos Bay and Bend, Sweet Home, and parts of Portland, the Dalles. I'll go faster now because I feel like I'm taking up a lot of time, but so franchising in the city, in the state of Oregon and on the West Coast is the primary way that cities achieve the garbage service. So actually Springfield was a very early adopter of it, one of the earliest in the state of Oregon. But now everywhere in the state of Oregon, except for Eugene, my understanding, and he has a sort of franchised contracted hauler for the residential service, and everywhere except the city of Portland itself has commercial franchise in the city of Eugene. But even in those areas, it's highly regulated. So it's sort of seen as a pseudo utility that a city will contract with one hauler. There's a lot of upfront sort of capital costs to get the business going. The trucks cost, $400,000 each car. So it's a big, substantial infrastructure investment. And usually the contracts are very long-term. So some of the things we do, Springfield citywide cleanup, which we have coming up. We do street sweeping, drop boxes and disposal at no charge. We donate just a number of services all throughout the city, totaling over $168,000. We did the leaf collection program and franchise fees back to the city as a portion of the fees that we collect. Keeps city staff time to a minimum and maintains stable rates for its citizens. Springfield historically and still to today have some of the lowest rates for residential curbside available in the state. Other things that Sanapak does, we complete, so every city over 4,000 in population is required by the state to meet the Opportunity to Recycle Act. So you have to provide certain recycling opportunities, education and outreach to your citizens. We fulfill those obligations for the city through a number of outreach programs. Just quickly, we have drive cams in all the trucks. We're the industry leader in safety. Waste Connections is by far. Sanapak has 90 plus local drivers that average 15 years more with the company. So a lot of long-term, especially in Springfield, a lot of long-term same drivers that have been doing the same routes for many, many years. Servant leadership there is a core value, is something that both Chris and I get judged on by our employees every year, and it's treated very seriously. There's some other services, some of the stuff, outreach. We have a free mobile app people can download that will give you a notification the night before, what cans to put out. Also access to the waste wizard, which can tell you what to recycle in the area. Last year, we started curbside composting in the city of Springfield. I'm not going to click on that link, but there's a cool little video there with Sluggo that talks about how to do it. So we rolled out in the city last July, and it's been going well. I haven't had any complaints or issues come to me from the processor, which is great. Sanapak's sister company across the street from Sanapak is EcoSort. EcoSort has been around for 25 years, over 25 years in Glenwood. All of the construction boxes that we take and many of the haulers and many of the companies in the area that do construction take the waste to EcoSort where it's sorted out. So we pull out the wood, the metal, the cardboard, anything that can be recycled later, we'll pull it out before it goes to the landfill. So we'll recycle the construction waste. EcoSort on the back end of it also does some recycling processing. You can see the sorting line there. This is just a bunch of stuff that we do in the community. High school scholarships, bike build. We did a beautiful Springfield truck wrap last year to promote keeping the rivers clean. This is something that you can kind of see me up in the corner, but a lot of people don't know. We've been the title sponsor for the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes for years now, and that's a great organization. So I always say that to say that when you support Santa Pac, we really do try and reach out and support the community. Recycling Modernization Act. So this is something that's happening that's big in the state of Oregon, a very progressive legislation that the state approved into law. It becomes effective in 2025. And what it does is a few things. It will make essentially the recycling producers, so the people that make the Coke and Pepsi bottles and those kind of things, responsible for helping to stabilize the cost of the recycling market. That's the overall goal. So those companies will form a group called a PRO. That PRO will create a fund. That fund will help with transportation of recycling, education and outreach, that kind of stuff. So that we don't have another situation where we had in 2017, where China refused America's garbage and we had a market collapse of recycling. So we're trying to so that's what the goal is to make it stable and sustainable long-term. So there's the funding for that. Another thing is it's going to create a statewide list. So everyone in every city in the state will have the same materials that can go into their recycle can. So we'll have some consistency there and all the education will look the same everywhere across the state. And another thing is the Truth in Labeling Act. So, and actually this just it's in front of the governor's desk in my understanding to be signed. But basically, by 2027, the first step is that on everything you buy that could be recyclable, there'll be a QR code. You can scan it and it'll tell you whether it can go in the can or not, or if not, where. So I think the vision long-term is that someday you might be able to see on everything that you buy, whether it can go in the recycle can or not very clearly. So this is the first step towards that. It's called Truth in Labeling. I think it's a really important thing. I am on the Association of Oregon Recyclers Legislative Committee and the Oregon Refuse and Recycling Association Board. And those are just some pictures of Santa Pac dumpsters by their Springfield murals. So anyway, okay, so that's a little pony show about Santa Pac. The main reason why we're here tonight is a rate adjustment request. We come in annually to discuss this and discuss the cost impacts that we've had year over year. So I wrote a letter just to kind of give you some historical context of that. 2020, we did not come in for a rate adjustment request due to the impacts of COVID-19. We didn't ask for an increase. 2021, we asked for a 2.1%. And last year CPI was trending very high, close to 9. We came in and asked the councilors, what you guys thought was feasible for the city, and requested a 5% at the time. So we went with a 5% rate adjustment last year. This year, CPI, as I'm sure you're aware, for the year of 2022, from January to December, was very high. It was 8.15%. Well, the CPI that we use typically just to sort of gauge off of is called the CPI All Urban Consumers West BC. So what that is Western United States. BC is small, medium-sized cities. So it's not like Seattle or Portland. It's more like Salem, Eugene area, BC. And that's and it's put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, United States government, and it's 8.15%. So we have seen those costs internally over the last few years, definitely. And Chris is here as well to talk. I wrote about some of them in here. Labor over the last year, we've seen an 8.9%, truck maintenance at 10.6% increase, container expense a 6.8% increase. There has been a fuel decrease from the high that it was last year at this time. So that's a negative 16.5 from sort of that all-time high. The big cost that we have that is increasing as of July 1 is the Lane County landfill, where we take the garbage, is doing a 7% tip fee increase on disposal. So that's about 30% of our total cost. And they're just doing a 7%. So that's why we're here tonight is, I usually like to also say, the average residential household in Springfield and really everywhere is a 35-gallon can picked up once a week at your house. So at that person's house, right now, it's $20.37 a month. With this 8.15, it would be going to $22.03. That's an increase of $1.66 per month on the average sort of household garbage. So with that, there's a bunch of information here. Unless Neil or Chris had anything else.
No, you covered, we'll just, take questions or.
And we're open to discussion. We kind of, I feel like last year we definitely wanted to respect, everything we were at, but 5% was probably less than our actual costs. This year, we're requesting the CPI of our costs. But we're open, we're happy to discuss it.
Well, before I open it up for costs, for conversations, right, what we're doing, Neil, is we're agreeing upon the number. And then they'll take that number forward into a public hearing so that we can pass on a rate increase. So what we got to end up this discussion with is some sort of percentage that we're agreeing to.
Correct. We'll take the guidance from tonight and build it into the adoption of the master fees and charges schedule, I believe, on June 5th.
We did invite Neil and Sam and Mary to come into Sanapac about a few weeks ago, kind of showed them more confidential business cost information and showed them sort of some hard numbers and actual percentages. So I don't know. I just wanted to share that they did that due diligence as well to visit the company. So
What questions do you guys have? Okay, so then we'll flip the conversation. Is everybody comfortable with the 8%? I think it's 8.1 in there, right? Okay. So I guess the only comment that I have is, we're, as a community, we're always pretty rate sensitive, right? So this is on the higher end of what I'm betting a lot of people are going to be, ultimately comfortable with, and I just want to flag that. But also, the clear message that I had is on top of inflation was the increase for the tipping fee, and how that contributes. And when last week, we saw a conversation starting to develop about investments into the dump, right? And so I think we just got to be aware, as we're talking to our partners in the county commission, is that we're passing through their fee increase onto our citizens. And as they kind of think about where they want to go strategically, we just have to be aware that we're actually, the folks that are passing that on to people's bills. That's not on Sanapac, that's a public policy question that the county's got to work through.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that it's important to note that this is a service that is super reliable. That is it doesn't matter whether it's snowing or it's raining or whatever. I know that the service is going to be there for me. And I think that that's important that we acknowledge that with your costs going up, just like with everybody else's. So sometimes you get what you pay for. I like paying for something that I know I can count on. So
thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Okay,
That's a testament to the drivers and supervisors on the ground. So thank you.
every week, the driver goes by, honks and waves at my daughters. So they're huge fans.
Well, we don't even tell them to do that.
I know. All right, so I think it's 8.15, and then we'll do good. Yeah, thank you guys, and happy 50th birthday.
Thank you very much.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you. I'm going to call the regular session of the Springfield City Council to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Counselor Weber.
Here.
Counselor Mo.
Here.
Counselor Rodley.
Here.
Counselor Blackwell.
Here.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Here, thank you.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we begin our meeting tonight, There are 2 designated times for public testimony this evening under public hearings and business from the audience. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the entrance of the city council chambers and give it to the city recorder. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak to either of those times, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom. The order of public testimony is as follows. Anyone in person in the council chambers, and then anyone who has raised their virtual hand. And Neil, how many folks do we have joining us?
Oh, we have approximately 50 folks in the chambers and maybe 9 online.
Very good. First item, please.
The first item under Springfield Upbeat is an awesome mayor's recognition. It's the Springfield High School basketball team, 22-23.
Or is there going to be a pickup game between the PD and the basketball team between this? I see enough. Okay, so we'll let the record show the PD didn't want any of that.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm gonna have the coaches come up and then I'm gonna read some of this and give you guys a chance to make some additional comments. It's really great to see you guys in the in the audience. Just come on up and we're gonna put you right next to the podium. I know, we're doing this on the fly here. So our Springfield Millers had a year to remember. Coming off a second place finish the year before, expectations were high going into the season. They were a young team, and making the state championship game in the 21-22 season was a surprise from everybody. The girls handled expectations, starting and finishing the season ranked #1 in the state polls, and finishing it off holding the first place trophy and cutting down the nets at Gill Coliseum for the 5A state championships, which is pretty cool to see. So the following list is of the team accomplishments. They finished as league champs in 12-0 in the Midwestern League, finished 19-0 against the 5A teams for the season. And of course, they won the state championship. So, and with a 3.5 GPA. Really, is there anything else about the team, the season, the experience that you would really like to share with us?
Talk to the mic.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to just tell you, every last one of them drive us crazy. But no, I'm proud of the girls. We got a very young team. We had 2 seniors. And we came in with very high expectations. And, we work hard every day. And, we planning on to keep this train running for a long time. So if this is what happens when you win the state title, y'all gonna see us back next year. So
That's great to hear.
I think aside from the state championship, which was a huge accomplishment, just thinking back to summer basketball, fall workouts, there was so much that went into preparing for the state championship that so many people didn't see. And the work ethic of this group on the court and off the court is very impressive, and we're very proud of them for all of the accomplishments that they've had. They've learned how to solve conflict together and just work through a lot of bumps that naturally come with just a basketball season, and they are all just growing so much as people, and it makes us really proud. And there's so much more that got accomplished off the court that we are very proud of them for.
Well, I got to tell you, we were all excited, and thank you for inspiring an entire community. So we're going to have you guys up and we're going to take a big group photo. So come on up. Very rarely do we even let people up here. That's how. Yeah. You guys stay. No. Sit.
There's no room.
There's room.
There's room. Don't worry if they're going to do bunny ears for you guys.
Not over back.
Come on. Come on, you Thurston High Mo. Come on.
That's awesome. All right, everyone look this way.
Chief.
Got it. Maybe some number ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right hand, right hand. Yes. I did. Oh,
Just make sure it's your index finger.
Got it.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah.
All right. We even have a to-go gift. for you guys.
Ooh.
All right. You guys do not have to stay for the entire meeting. The PE does. There's a couple of- you know, we give you that.
Thanks.
Chair Miller. Very cool.
I'll answer. Yeah.
All right, next item, please.
This next item is also awesome, just to be clear, and it's the National Law Enforcement Week proclamation. And Mayor, this is your item.
All right. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Springfield Police Department. And whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 23,785 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty. And whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 35th Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13, 2022. And whereas May 15, 2022 is designated as the Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of the fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half-staff. Therefore, I, Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of the City of Springfield, do hereby proclaim May 14th through 20th, 2023 as National Law Enforcement Week in the City of Springfield, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and communities across the nation. And before we come down and take a picture, I did want to invite the chief up to make a few comments about Law Enforcement Memorial Day.
Thank you, Mayor Council. I'll try to keep it brief, but if I don't, it's because I feel so proud of the men that are standing here behind me and the women of SPD. So thank you for the proclamation recognizing law enforcement around the country and more specifically, the people of SPD. So the SPD officers that are here today, on behalf of the city executive team and all the people of Springfield, I want to thank you for everything you do for this community. So as the chief, I get the opportunity to see and hear about the amazing things that they do every single day, and your bravery, your dedication, and your tireless service to those in need is humbling, to say the least. Today's Peace Officer Memorial Day. It's a day for us to pay tribute to the men and women of this profession who gave their lives in service to something greater than themselves. And as Americans, we collectively must respect their courage, honor their sacrifice, and I'm sorry, never forget the loss that families continue to experience long after they're gone. So for those of us that are active members of law enforcement, today is a day for reflection. And it's a day for us to renew our commitment to honoring those fallen heroes and their families. And we do that through service that's grounded in dignity, respect, courage, and in a way that is uncompromising in the pursuit of justice for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And I just wanted to say before, as we come up and we'll all be down to take the picture, just thank you guys. You know, as elected officials in this community, you know, we don't get that many times we get to stand in front of you guys or have you guys down to city council. And I just want to say, I really appreciate what you guys do every single day.
This is fine, yeah. You bet.
All right, next item, please.
Next item is the consent calendar.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo, Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 yeas, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is public hearings. You have one public hearing. Public hearing number one is liquor license endorsements for the renewal period of 2023 through 2024. Jeff Pascal is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me. Tonight, you have the list of the 175 businesses for which staff anticipate renewals coming in for liquor licenses. Attached as well is a report from police that shows calls of service there. One of the things noted was it's down from last year. Chapter 7, the section is attached for you to review. It requires the council to hold a public hearing, taking public comment. And then the last thing is for the council to give their endorsement or non-endorsement. And right now, staff doesn't find any reason for council not to give a positive recommendation for those 175 anticipated renewals.
All right, any questions? All right, then I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't see any cards. Neil, do we have anybody wanting to speak online?
I don't see any hands for this item.
All right, I'm going to close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the liquor license renewal list.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is business from the audience. We have item 1, Tim Black with St. Vincent de Paul, and he has 5 minutes before we get to the regular cards.
Mayor, councilors, thank you. Appreciate the time. I just wanted to take a few minutes really just to say thank you. It was a long, hard winter and we could not have done it without your support, having the memorial building. I have just a few pictures, give you more feeling like that you were there. You can go ahead and advance. Egan is all about the volunteers. This is the volunteer check-in area in the memorial building. You can see the fancy name tags they use. And I just love looking at this and seeing all the names. And I think you have a handout with some of the statistics. We had 230 unique volunteers who worked just in Springfield this winter, more than 1,550 hours. And we had 60 some volunteers who worked 10 or more nights. It's a huge commitment. This was the 13th year of Egan, and we were open 31 nights. That was 6 more than the previous winter. And of course, every time I catch myself whining about that, I remember who it was really hard on, and that's our guests, because there were so many other nights this winter, as you know, that were just above, just below, so wet, so many nights. It was miserable out there. We have to follow our protocol, and we open when it's below 30, and that's what we did. You can go ahead and advance. So we do clean blankets in black bags. This is an Egan thing. So those are clean blankets ready to be loaded in. That's the hallway coming up off the ramp where we did check-in, and all those tables are where we put the items because our guests check their items in before they go and spend the night. You can go ahead and advance. As I said, 31 nights. This is the gymnasium in the Memorial Building, and you can move on there. And just want to show you a couple volunteers. That's Jim Cantrell. That's going to pop up. That's Jim. He has a safety vest on. We have volunteers work outside the entire time, all night in the cold, just to make sure that the parking lot's safe and everything else is safe. And go ahead. And this is Alma Beck, who right now she's making grilled cheese, it looks like, but she has been there from the beginning of Egan all those years ago when it was at Everett United Methodist Church, and she loves making flapjacks. That's her thing. Go ahead. As you know, it's really important for us, being a low barrier shelter, to welcome everybody, that we welcome guests or guests with their animals. And there are many. It's usually dogs. We do have a random cat every now and then. And of course, we have the random other things every now and then. And on the left there is John Helmer Jr. And the Helmer family from Springfield, they make this a family affair. John's dad, John Sr., and his sister, Charlotte Helmer. She's one of our new up and coming volunteer leads. They really make it a family affair. It's great. Go ahead. We still, Springfield is one of the few sites that even with COVID, they still cook dinner for everybody on site. And of course, Food for Lane County is one of the huge partners. You can go ahead. I just wanted to show you some of the other partners. It's so many. We are really fortunate in this community to have public safety at our side. All these LPD who gives rides to our guests, and so many others. You can go ahead and advance. COVID was a real challenge. No surprise, we lost a lot of volunteers. We lost a lot of our sites. It was really difficult, and you can go ahead and click the next one. And then this year, we've all heard about the opioid crisis. We lived it. Narcan was that last little picture. It's okay. We had to do it. Our volunteers had to do it 3 or 4 times this year, doing the nasal spray to revive somebody who was in overdose. It's a real problem, and we have plenty of it now. And, you know, crisis leads to more partnerships. So we continue to gather more partnerships, folks who help, who want to take care of our guests, medically and otherwise, and we just couldn't do it without any of them. Go ahead. That is Santa, but it's also David Strahan, who's in the room here. And Springfield is such a unique site for us. They go beyond just the core mission of getting inside. They really try to create community for the people who come into our shelters. And this is just an example there. You can go on. It is tough. It can be tough being a neighbor of an Egan Warming Center site. If you click it again, I think it'll show. We dealt with this, and I know that probably all of you saw this from time to time. That was probably the worst right there. It's a challenge, and we cleaned it up as best we could. Go ahead. But you know, that's a person under there, under that blanket, and that's really what we're all about here. What we're about at Egan. And it's okay for people to be frustrated when they see messes like that and to be angry. What I hope they remember, though, is that they should be upset because that person had no other option that night. We have so many, even more people with mental illness issues who just cannot take care of themselves. And those are the ones who end up having to spend so much time on. And I know as a community, we're going to continue to work so that we do take care of those folks. Go ahead. You know, Egan started and ends with the volunteers, and it's just amazing. And we couldn't do it without them. And just so once again, I just want to thank the city. I want to thank, you know, Bahana, Mike Espinoza from Public Works, who was helpful, Aaron Fifield, of course, Neil. And of course, thanks to you, Mayor, and everyone. You identified real money to help us this year, and it didn't end up coming to fruition because we couldn't use the church. But thank you for that. And we're going to need that. We're probably going to be looking for another site this year. We're going to do our best, and we know that you're there to help us. So thank you for letting city staff help us. It's much appreciated, and summer's going to go by fast. We're going to work and organize, and we'll see you soon, I'm sure. Thank you.
Hey, Tim, come back for a second.
Can you tell me how somebody would get a hold of you or get a hold of someone to be able to become a volunteer?
Yeah, we always have a bunch of new volunteer orientations, mostly starting in the fall. You can just go to the St. Vinny's website and look for, just type Egan in the search or emergency shelter. My email, I'm always happy to talk to people. It's very easy. It's just tim.black@svdp.us. SVDP is St. Vincent de Paul.
Cool. Thank
So
you.
happy to talk to folks.
Thanks for coming, Tim.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay, we're gonna move to the cards next and then online. First card that I have is Joe DeCotley. And if you could state your name and location for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor Van Gordon, distinguished council members. My name for the record is Joe DeCotley. I live just outside the city of Springfield. I've owned and operated a business for over the last 16 years. And I am here today to speak on behalf of Common Sense for Springfield. Common Sense for Springfield is a 501c4 organization that encourages public debate and discussion of related public policy issues for the economic and overall welfare of our community, this community of Springfield. Our organization has submitted a letter for the record, but I just wanted to come in person and talk to you today because I feel passionate about this issue. First, I would like to commend you on the approach that you've taken for the process of collecting and engaging the community and collecting feedback via the online survey that you put out there. I really appreciate that. I think that is a step in the right direction of engaging the entire community, the stakeholders, trying to listen and find out what the community is trying to tell us while we construct this ordinance. Second, I wanted to, I like the approach of making this particular ordinance as narrow as possible, but also reasonable. I would like continue to use the public feedback that you have received and adjust the ordinance just to a more finely point. We highlighted a couple of items in our communication, our letter surrounding specifically the protection of children. And the other point was, quote, the objectively reasonable as to time, unquote, stated in the House Bill 3115. And lastly, once you've completed your ordinance discussions and fine-tuned it, I would love to encourage you to distribute that as widely as you can to the community so the citizens of Springfield, the stakeholders, can understand the new policy, uphold it, and support it. We are Springfield, and we are proud of the city that we have made. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jason Prophet.
Thanks for your time. Jason Prophet, Quarry Road. About three things. It's great to see the guys from the police department here tonight. Now, if they just write some tickets and slow the noise down. So I see on the post and stuff, you guys want to grow Springfield. I see that on Marcola and 28th Street. You know, Thursday night, the city run out of ambulance. The fire department waited 30 minutes sitting on a call. And I don't know how backed up they actually are. The city doesn't have the services in place to grow. And I don't know how many ambulances we have here and how many we share. So that needs to be addressed. You got 4 guys on a truck sitting out there for 30 minutes waiting to be on calls. Now, my other issue is the city's coding my septic tank wrong and my storm drain. And I asked you to look at it. I've asked the lawyer to look at it. We're going to end up going to court. I don't have sewer. I've asked the city to come out and show me where I'm hooked up at sewer. I'm getting $16 a month charge for that. But $500 a month or $500 a year. So I don't know how else to resolve it, but to go file on the Wednesday in the court. So I think that ends everything I got.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Arwen Mosta Spain.
Good evening. My name is Arwen Mosta Spain and I live in Eugene. I am the founder of Carry It Forward, which you most likely know is a 501c3 nonprofit that serves unhoused people in Lane County. We're currently running 2 camps in Eugene, 1 camp in Cottage Grove, and manage the car camping program in Springfield. All our participants receive case management and housing navigation assistance, and we have a high success rate in getting people into more permanent housing. We also have a vocational program for people who want to get back into the workforce. So I'm here tonight to speak as a service provider to address how the camping ordinance impacts our population and the work we do. The ordinance is problematic for several reasons. It seems to lump all homeless people under one umbrella. And the reality is that homelessness does not discriminate. It touches every category of people. We serve elders and medically fragile people, LGBTQ and trans people, veterans, and people of all colors. Many of these people are Springfielders who are not currently served by Springfield. One of our Eugene camps is actually named after a Springfielder, Tom Campbell, and specializes in serving medically fragile folks. I say all this to illustrate the complexity of unhoused people who should not be lumped all together. Second, the ordinance does not provide solutions. It seems to push people out of sight and punish individuals with higher fines. It names every place people are not allowed, but does not identify legal places for people to be. It is not acceptable in my mind to leave it at the discretion of the city manager to identify locations, because finding and creating places in Springfield should be mandatory. Lastly, court cases and recent legislation have put the responsibility for addressing homelessness directly on local governments. To quote Martin versus Boise, 9th Circuit 2019, an ordinance violates the 8th Amendment insofar as it imposes criminal sanctions against homeless individuals for sleeping outdoors or on public property when no alternative shelter is available to them. This ordinance only contributes to perpetuation of stigma and punishment rather than real solutions. These are your people. They are your daughters and sons, your mothers and fathers, and your grandparents. They are part of your community. They also need safe places to be, to get on their feet and stabilize so that they can give back. I would like to see more of Springfield's self-sufficient pride in supporting thoughtful, comprehensive approaches to homelessness in your city, in conjunction with service providers who can support this as a city goal. As it stands, this ordinance only makes our work and the lives of those we serve more difficult. So I ask you tonight, where do Springfielders go to sleep at night? Thank you for your time.
Chris McAllister.
Mr. Mayor, esteemed members of the council, my name is Chris McAllister and I came from your streets. I reside in Ward 3 and I've been honored to serve your people, both over the past winters and this recent heat wave. I use 2 words with distinction, whereas others use them interchangeably. Unhoused is someone who is experiencing the loss of housing and has options for relief. Homeless is a population that has no options comparable to the exact need. Springfield's population of singles and couples are predominantly homeless, as you have not designated them a legal place for them to be within time, place, or manner, unless you invoke the words of our Officer Burke and tell them to go to another sovereign jurisdiction, Eugene. I am not opposed to the city doing its role. I am to adding weight to those with the greatest unmet needs. I understand Eugene has a similar item before them, but they have a different stance. They have a plan. They have a place, a series of places with different themes to try and meet the needs. Cottage Grove has a 4-tier plan with a quarter of our population. We lack an emergency plan that does not place predominantly into the children and families or emergent winter relief programming. We set out plans that then lack our political accountability with those in our jurisdiction, our 6 wards. Mr. Vogney has represented the emergency management component of the county all-in process with energy and thoughtful response. I am thankful that he is a voice for what we have in the room. Safety of vulnerable populations, children, women, and adults with disabilities is the top priority of a crisis system, and Oregon's bed inventory is too small to ensure that safety. This is from the Oregon Community Foundation's study on homelessness, released 2019. They also say that the state will not make progress on homelessness if the hard work is done only by those who directly serve the homeless on a daily basis. We are not asking the city of Springfield to fix homelessness. We are asking the city to be kind and to be accountable with its laws. Blake versus Grants Pass shows how a municipality with legislative support challenged Martin versus Boise and came up short. All residents includes the unhoused and homeless who will be identified by the ordinance. This case highlights how these so-called quality of life ordinances cost cities almost 4 times the amount they spend on housing and safe sheltering that would then negate the need for such enforcement. 2 studies and 2 regional legal rulings point to redress being necessary should this ordinance pass as written. I encourage the city to meet with providers and agencies who are tasked with this work to provide a sound approach to make sure that all Springfielders are served by the ordinances we portend. As written, this ordinance could be challenged under section 1, subsection 4, as the nature of these regulations do not take into consideration the perspective of the targeted individuals. June 5th, 2020, the memorial building was closed and 17 of Springfield's most vulnerable people were asked to leave city property. It's also my birthday. I feel forever tied to June 5th, homelessness in this city. Please vote no without further understanding for the ban of June 5th, 2023. I yield my time.
Johannes Tadeo.
Hello, City Council and Mayor Van Gordon. My name is Johannes Tadeo, and I'm part of Carry It Forward and Safer and Live in Ward 3. I want to say thank you for your support for Egan and your car camping program are the safe spaces to be in Springfield. I oversee the case management for the Springfield camps. I get to see who they are and hear their stories each week, their concerns, their goals, and the fortunate pain that they carry due to how they're labeled. There is more to fixing the unhoused people. We operate in a manner that is non-judgmental in our organization. We don't fix anyone. We give them a space to heal and see their potential. We try to provide folks an opportunity to feel human, work, gain skills, and stay in the community that they grew up in. I heard from comments that were shared 2 weeks ago what folks had to say and see. They do not see the potential we see when they focus on the actions, on the actions of a few being taken for the whole community. This isn't right for Springfield, so why would it be acceptable for our fallen? It's unfortunate that we will create a public ban that will exclude our community from places that are safe. We should accommodate and work together as a community like we did in 2020 and find ways to help and change and shift the blame and finding safe places for people to be. We should not further criminalize our community and tell folks to get out of our town when they are not even receiving services in a place that is their home and always has been. I was part of the unhoused community in 2013, 2014. I was invisible to some and most folks didn't or couldn't know that I was living on the streets. Unhoused communities come in all shapes, needs, and colors. You know the work I do outside of CIF. Imagine if I was asked to leave my city because of folks are not familiar with my struggle, because they saw me as dirty instead of seeing that we need more support in areas to help and bring back folks on their feet. Let's find solutions instead of blame. Imagine what other potential people have when you invest in them, like Chris and I were able to accomplish. The potential of our people have when given the same chance and opportunity. Please do right by our people and the potential our displaced Springfielders have and can be, so you can also see their productive capacity. Imagine the things that they would do if they had sleep and a place to map out their reality so that they can live how we do now. Is this a Springfield we want to be? Please recognize your residents. Vote no on the ban. Thank you.
Julie Sonham.
Hi, my name is Julie Sonam. I live at 407 South 4th Street in Springfield. And a few weeks ago, I came and I had been planning to talk to you about what I'm going to talk to you about tonight, but I got going on a rabbit hole with the garbage. So the update on the garbage is that now there's a monthly garbage cleanup happening and there's a lot of volunteers that have been showing up. And so I'm happy to tell you that's been handled. What my passion is health and well-being. And I spent the last 5 years going to Willamette board meetings and talking to them about the use of chemicals in public parks, places, and schools. My background is I'm a registered nurse, but now I'm a real estate agent, and I just really think that we can do better. There was a study that was done, and Willamette was really open to the idea of transitioning away from using pesticides and chemicals. And I thought they handled it really well. They took it seriously. They had some training. Beyond Toxics, a local organization went and met with them and brought in a specialist who specializes in organic landscape management without the use of chemicals. And they made a commitment to transition away from it. And so I would like to see that happen in my lifetime before I die. And that started 5 years ago. I started advocating 5 years ago. And like I said, they've been open and they listen, but it's still kind of business as usual. I think it's really hard, even in my own life, when we get going on doing things a certain way and it's easy and we just do it and it's just how it is. And I think we can do better. So I wanted to talk to you guys about it since I know you work with Willamette Lane and I don't know who holds the power and who can tell who what to do, but I would love it if our money went to healthy alternatives. And if you go online, there are cities, non-toxic communities all over the United States popping up now. There are 25 in California, 2 in Arizona, 4 in Colorado, 5 in Connecticut, 7 in Florida, 4 in Ohio, 5 in Pennsylvania. The list goes on. There's many, many states now that are having cities that are not using chemicals in parks, public places, and schools. It's particularly important for the kids and pets because a lot of pets, if you look at what the veterinarians are saying, like all the problems that are happening with pets have a lot to do with what they are walking on in the parks. Same with kids. Kids are very vulnerable. So there are online IPM, the document that they use to govern public places that they can do with a non-toxic management. And that's what I'm advocating for is.
All right, thank you. Neil, that last card I have, is anybody raising their hand online?
Yeah, we currently have one hand up and that's Daphne Mantis. And Daphne, I'm going to unmute your microphone. So just a little technical glitch we're working on. Daphne, you should be able to unmute your microphone now.
Thank you. I'm Daphne Mantis. I live on West D Street in Springfield. And I just want to, I guess, repeat what the Carry It Forward speakers have emphasized, which is the draft ordinance to update camping in Springfield does not provide, there's a long list in subsection 3 as to prohibited spaces. There is a suggestion that subsection 4 might provide for where camping would be allowed when there are no shelters available. Yet there is nothing stated in subsection 4 as to where is the alternative, the reasonable time, place, and manner alternative when there are no shelters available. So I don't think either the draft ordinance A or B could comply with the requirements under House Bill 3115. That's all I have.
Daphne.
Thank you.
We have one more hand raised. The next speaker is Nancy Forrest. And Nancy, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Can.
Thank you for taking my testimony this evening. My name is Nancy Forrest. I do work for Carry It Forward. In 2020, I found myself engaging with people at the Egan Warming Center at the Memorial Building, where I met 32 people with longstanding ties to Springfield. Later, when we were conducting street outreach efforts over a year after that shelter closed, I met over 100 people in various places in Springfield, business doorways, remote fields and thickets, in the woods and along the riverbank. And actually, to my surprise, I discovered that 75 to 80% of the folks are from Springfield, many born and raised here, and this is their home. I'm going to share 3 quick examples with you of some of the wonderful people I've been able to work with. Larry's a single 40-year-old male. He left home and school at the age of 13. He began living on the streets. He probably had developmental disabilities that were never adequately addressed. And he came from a family that was poorly equipped to recognize his challenges or to seek appropriate help. He spent most of his adolescence and all of his adult life trying to get employed, but could never quite put it together. Before he enrolled in a Carry It Forward program, he was unable to get basic things done, like replace his ID, apply for disability, renew his OHP, connect with medical services, apply for housing, and so on. Not because he didn't want to, but because he was unable to do so without significant assistance and a safe, secure place to stay. Since checking into our low barrier safe sleep site, he has his ID, he's applied for and is close to receiving disability. He's received a housing voucher. He's likely received long-term assistance and benefits from a lot of agencies that serve people with this disability. Larry's finally getting his life together, but he misses Glenwood. Zelda, she was 35-year-old single female. She too came from a family in Springfield that did not understand, nor were they able to support the multiple disabilities she was born with. She basically spent her entire adult life living on the streets in and around Glenwood and Springfield. She was sometimes in shelters like Dusk to Dawn. Basically, she was finally able, when she enrolled in our shelter, after languishing for about 20 years in and around Eugene and Springfield. She was diagnosed with multiple disabilities. She received disability. She was finally getting the medical treatment she needed. And sadly, she passed away from natural causes only a couple of weeks before she was to receive the keys to her new and only home. Her passing was pretty hard to take. She was only 35, and she always dreamed of establishing a home in Springfield. And lastly, I want to talk about Joan. She's 76, lived most of her life in Springfield, spent the last 10 years in an affordable housing complex in Springfield. Due to a paperwork snafu, she didn't realize that they thought she was vacating her unit. When they told her she had to leave, she actually packed up everything, put it into storage, and started living in her car. We encountered her at the Egan Warming Center at the Memorial Building, and we are trying desperately now to assist her in a safe, secure place. And she wants to come back to Springfield. So when can we bring her home? Thank you.
Mayor, we have one more hand up. It's Vonnie Mickelson, and Vonnie, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here on behalf of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce at 101 South A Street. The Chamber's been studying and monitoring the camping code ordinance revisions specific to non-sanctioned camping on public land. We've distributed the city's survey to our members, reviewed those responses, monitored council work sessions and related public testimony. We've also met with and received feedback from business and community partners. And as tenants in a city-owned building have firsthand experience operating a business and serving the public. Our objective has been to ensure that businesses are heard and that the preservation of community health, safety, and economic vitality are assured. Based on these efforts, we conclude that the ordinance as drafted reflects sufficient intent to preserve community health, safety, and economic vitality while also providing clear and specific rules and accountability measures for non-sanctioned camping. While the ordinance itself is not proposed as a solution for the larger complex issues surrounding houselessness, public discourse has brought attention to several concerns, challenges, and economic impacts businesses are experiencing now that deserve attention. So we appreciate the city's responsiveness to those that rise to the forefront, such as costs shouldered by business, that of maintenance, restoration, enforcement, and liability, circumstances that present harmful and unsafe conditions for employees and clientele, any risk for loss of new development or business recruitment, opportunities, employees in our tax base, and costs of enforcement and resolution or preservation of public health and safety that could be shouldered by local employers and employees. For these reasons, we encourage continued constructive dialogue with businesses and community partners and the provision of clear specific guidance, business assistance, and solutions-oriented strategies. Compassionate care for our vulnerable populations is not to be confused with leniency for criminal activity or behaviors that diminish quality of place. The monitoring and tracking impacts of these ordinance changes and houselessness in general will be important to inform and address impacts over time. We'll advocate for resources in support of targeted and coordinated response, resolution, and prevention solutions with our public and private partners, particularly those that strengthen workforce reentry training programs, ensure public safety, stabilize housing affordability, and improve mental and behavioral health services. Thank you for your consideration of our perspective and for working with the Springfield business community. Thank you.
Mayor, no other hands for this item.
All right, thank you. We're going to open up to council response. The one comment I had before I open it up to everybody else is, Julie, there's a gentleman in the back from Willamette Lane. I'm going to put him on the spot here. We don't like, Willamette Lane has its own elected board, and you know, you really need to go back towards them as far as sort of guidance. He can help put you in contact with the right folks. I knew it. Eric's got it. Thank you for letting us draft you into this one, but at least he'll help get you to the right person. Anybody else for council response? All right, next item, please.
Any business from the city council? Corey.
Just a few things as we're halfway through May. One, tomorrow is election day. So anybody who's listening who hasn't voted, please vote by 8 p.m. tomorrow. We have 3 ballot boxes unless there's been some surprises in Springfield. One in Thurston, one right downstairs, and one at the Albertsons at sort of Mohawk and Marcola. May is also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which many of you know. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I just wanted to bring that attention to everyone and get that on the public record. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Next item, please.
Next item is under business from the city manager. Item number 1 is intergovernmental agreement for the management and use of the Georgia Pacific Natural Area. Christina Kraz is here for this item.
Thank you. So this item is a permanent intergovernmental agreement for the ongoing joint ownership of the Georgia Pacific Natural Area is what it's called right now. I understand Willamette Lane is potentially working on identifying new naming opportunities for that property. This is a large jointly owned property between the city of Springfield, Utility Board, and Willamette Lane in the area of Clearwater Park and the Middle Fork path area between the mill race and the river. The city individually owns property right directly that the mill race occupies. This is property from that boundary to the river. The history here is this property was purchased in the 1990s jointly from Georgia Pacific, hence the name. And it was governed under an intergovernmental agreement for the management from about 1995 until present. A couple of years ago, we came to you and asked the city council to approve a temporary intergovernmental agreement to allow some pilot program equestrian uses on the property, and then to continue that via several series of amendments while the parties worked on an updated intergovernmental agreement for the property. In that time, Willamette Lane has adopted a master plan for the park that kind of outlines some potential park activities that could go into that area over time for enhance the recreational assets of the property. And that was reviewed by this Springfield Utility Board and by the City Council and approved by both the council and sub as being kind of consistent with our interests in co-owning that property over time. So this intergovernmental agreement sort of resets the way the parties are going to work together. It's not drastically different from the prior agreement. It's primarily intended to recognize that the master plan is now in place, and so Willamette Lane can move forward as outlined in that master plan with developing those recreational uses on the property. And it also provides some provisions around what the city can do and sub can do. For the city of Springfield, our primary interest in the property is to maintain the water quality associated with the mill race and the river. And that's really important to us in our environmental obligations under federal permits, as well as just being good stewards of the environment. And then sub has interest related to wellhead protection because drinking water for the city comes from just adjacent to that property. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Joe.
So I'm looking at the maps. I'm trying to determine, does Springfield sub and Willamette Lane have specific boundaries within that property, or is it joint ownership where they're all the same?
It's joint ownership, just like when you're married and you and your spouse jointly own a property, it's the same provision. So one of the components of this agreement that wasn't specified as clearly in the prior one is that no one of those parties could sell its interest without permission from the other parties. So we wouldn't, I don't know who would want to buy property jointly with City of Willamette Lane and sub, but conceivably if that were to come up, that wouldn't be an option unless everyone was on board. So it's sort of joint tenancy, if you will.
Okay, so and follow up then on the original agreement, was it communally purchased at that time, or was it was still that same way? It was purchased that way, correct?
It was purchased that way. I don't have the details on who bought in what component, but my understanding is there were funds from all three entities that went into the purchase. And we're not changing the structure of ownership. It's been jointly owned by all three at an equal level since 1995. And we went through a process previously where Willamette Lane asked if the other parties were interested in continuing to sort of jointly own the property. And the response back was, yes, all three entities have strong interests in maintaining joint ownership of the property.
So do we know the valuation of Springfield's part?
I don't, we haven't had an appraisal done on the property because we weren't proposing to change who owns what.
So, but we're not realizing any return other than, I mean, as far as the city is not realizing any return other than providing or giving that property up to Willamette Lane.
We're not relinquishing any ownership of the property.
Still be-
So we're still complete owners, what sort of 1/3 share owners of the property. We have been before, we'll be continuing that. Explicitly allows us to continue to use the property for one of our purposes, which is wetlands conservation. If in the future we would like to do wetland banking, this property may offer those opportunities. And it was reviewed by environmental services staff pretty thoroughly. The master plan that Willamette Lane's adopted was reviewed pretty thoroughly to ensure that that master plan wouldn't conflict with our complementary desired use of the property.
And I understand that. And so that the last of the follow-up question is that, so can we assume that all liability of that property is still joint, or is it going to be resting with Willamette Lane?
There are specific indemnification provisions. So each party maintains their own insurance over the property. There is also what's called recreational immunity in Oregon, which is any entity, public or private, that makes property open to the public for recreational use is immune from liability associated with that use. There are some specific concerns around equestrian use if that continues. So the agreement includes a specific provision that Willamette Lane will insure the property on behalf of the city and sub for any equestrian risks associated with the property.
Okay, so we're going to be absolved of potential issues down the road. This will basically hand it over for complete management to Willamette Lane, and City of Springfield is not going to be on the hook for anything.
I would say we were in a better position liability wise than under the 1995 joint ownership agreement, which wasn't specific about those risks.
So not completely, but some.
Yeah, we're not completely absolved of liability, but recreational immunity in the state of Oregon is pretty strong. The property is open to the public for recreational uses, and so that also helps provide protection there. And then with the specific, there's other provisions that if a party were to take on a specific use that wasn't contemplated, that party would provide insurance. So if we had liability related to our own use of the property, related to, employee workers' compensation claim related to going out and inspecting wetlands for water quality, we would still bear that liability.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Back to you, Joe.
Going back. So I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to execute the intergovernmental agreement for the management and use of the Georgia Pacific Natural Area as substantially provided therein.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
and Counselor Fisher.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses. Next item, please.
Any other business from the city manager?
No further business. Thank you.
Next item is business from the city attorney. One item, the camping ordinance. Mary Bridget Smith is here for the staff report.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here before you. My name is Mary Bridget Smith. I'm the city attorney. Here before you tonight to continue the discussion on the camping ordinance. And this is an item that the council has been considering over the past few months. This evening, the agenda is to discuss three aspects of this: the draft code that is in your packet, the process and next steps. And really with next steps is to talk about some of the implementation and other steps that the staff will be doing as connected with this project, and that you'll be hearing about in either different ways through council communication items or future work sessions or future items. Moving forward. So I know you've seen this before, but I just want to frame up the discussion. So again, this is some information from the federal court rulings and HB 3115. So it's the idea that a government entity cannot criminalize conduct that is an unavoidable consequence of being homeless, namely sitting, lying, or sleeping. But those did say that governments can regulate that behavior and that conduct. Then the state legislature essentially codified those rulings in HB 3115 and mandated to local governments that if they were going to have regulations about camping, they needed to be objectively reasonable to all your stakeholders, including those with experiencing homelessness. As I've said, probably every time that I've gone up here, this area is developing and many cities are going through the same process that we are right now. But this is the process that's been, what we're talking about tonight is the draft ordinance that the process that Springfield has gone through for its community. And so now I want to talk a little bit about process. So this would be a change to the municipal code that requires an adoption of an ordinance that must be read twice at regular sessions such as this. We had one reading already on April 17th. There was some direction from the council, though, to look at the fine amount. So I'm bringing this back for what I would call an additional first reading. So you're not adopting this ordinance tonight, but you are providing direction about the version of the ordinance that will move forward for adoption, if that makes sense. Does that make sense from just like a processy, like what we're doing? Okay. So there are two ordinances in your packet. Draft ordinance A just takes the revised direction or the direction from the council about the fine and inserts a $200 fine for enforcement. As a reminder, that was a conversation that the council was having about sort of appropriate fine for this kind of offense. The city's existing prohibited camping regulation is a violation, and it has the base fine of or a fine not to exceed $720. That's our standard fine for violations, and it's a fine not to exceed $720. The court may order a different amount in their discretion. I don't know what their practice is, to be honest, so I couldn't tell you exactly what they would do in this circumstance, but they do have flexibility up to that $720 amount. Then looking at draft ordinance B, that also has the fine in it. It also has two additional areas as to location. We had talked about prohibiting camping in public parks. I had inadvertently left out multi-use paths, which are part of the park system, and would be asking the council to consider adding that in. The third area is an area I didn't feel I adequately addressed on the April 17th hearing, and that was downtown. We had a lot of public feedback about looking at regulating downtown different than other areas of the city because of the revitalization of downtown in recent years, and just that it's an area where there are lots of people, and also the way the right of way and traffic works downtown. Downtown is zoned mixed use. The way the ordinance is now, it prohibits camping in residentially zoned areas, but that does not mean mixed use. So I'm asking the council to consider expressly prohibited camping in the downtown area. It's called the downtown exception area, which is like River to 8th Street, to the alley between B and C, to the railroad tracks. So that would be the area of downtown. It's an area that's defined in our development code. So it's not like we're creating a new area of downtown, another area for people to keep track of. So those are the three options or three additional items for the ordinance that I'm asking the council to consider or have a discussion about. If it works, we can go through one by one, or if I just want to throw it back to you for discussion, but whatever works best for you.
Joe.
Excuse me. Thank you for all your work on this. It's quite an exceptional ordinance, I believe. So I'm taking note of the conversation was deviated from our standard practice of our typical set bails for our code violations. And I think that with the comment that I focused in on this evening is that it's up to $720, which means it can be $1 up to $720 or none. So I think that covers all the areas in my mind of what all the counselors spoke of. Everybody seemed to have kind of a different number in their head. And I understand that, but I also understand too, is that I believe, and you may know this, there's case law that the judge typically must follow in regards to what they call the ability to pay. And that typically is a very prescribed schedule in which the judges, municipal judges must follow in regards to assessing fines and bails to defendants. So do you concur with that?
I don't know if I could speak to that, just I don't have that experience or that handy in my head right now, but.
And
not
Judge Triem spoke of it many times.
Okay.
In regards to practices, the previous presiding judge and our current presiding judges spoke of it in finance judicial meetings in the past. So I think that plays a role.
Okay.
So I would be fine with just leaving it as is instead of going and altering the bail sets and relying on the judge's assessment of those defendants and their ability to pay. Secondly, I think I also would concur with adding in the multi-use pass. That makes sense. It just was an oversight from before. And I do very much, and I think downtown businesses and our chambers, several folks on our survey and the hundreds of emails we received, were very concerned about the downtown area after spending so many years of frankly, just cleaning it up from where it used to be. And so the borders, I'm curious, now you had a prescribed border, but I'm wondering would it be easier to do that? Or I should say, obviously that would work, but it would be easier to use the Springfield Economic Development Agency borders for the downtown area?
Yeah, we did look at that. The downtown urban renewal plan actually extends farther out to, I believe, 14th Street. It's a bigger area, not connected back to the development code, which seemed more regulatory. So that's how we came up with the downtown exception area.
Okay, I mean, if it sounds like that may be easier to do. And then I am also have an area that I didn't think about earlier as well that was brought up as far as centers near children's activities, such as schools, public, private, daycare centers, libraries, and businesses and nonprofit businesses that specifically deal with children.
Yeah, I can speak to the schools. The intent with having residentially zoned property, not allowing camping there, was to try and capture the schools. I couldn't speak to tonight. I saw the letter from Common Sense, the Common Sense group. I couldn't speak to specifically to specific nonprofits or private daycares, but that's something we can look at over the summer and then potentially come back with some changes if necessary.
I support that myself. I'm speaking just for myself.
Corey.
So I remain interested in reducing the fine amount. $200, I think we were all like 100 and it's 200. And I realized that I may be a lone voice, but I am interested in reducing the fine amount.
Okay.
Because we're talking about people who have limited resources. And I think, I hear what folks are saying about being concerned about children, and that's making this assumption that no one with children is homeless. And the farther we push people away from services and we push people who may be homeless with children away from schools, G Street Oasis is right across from schools and right along an alley in my neighborhood with schools. So I think the bigger concern from my years of experience working on this is just putting a mixed group of people together in a place that's unregulated. So that's part of it, is the more narrow we make the places that people can be. You might have people who are, offenders with people who are families, and that's not that would be us incurring harm. So I am not I would be willing to chat more about what that looks like, and just keep in mind that our unhoused and homeless populations are not all the same people. So I would be interested in moving forward with draft ordinance B, and probably have lots more to say as we continue to talk about this. So thank you.
Steve.
I was a real strong supporter of dropping that fine way down, but when I hear the ability to pay can be applied by the judge, I feel a lot more comfortable with a higher amount now.
Back to the standard fine of $720.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? So, and just to clarify, because we're all talking on the fly. Though, we went with a standard fine, the judge would evaluate the ability to pay and could yield a fine from $1 all the way up to the cap.
Yeah, I believe so. The way the code is written is as up to a $720 fine. So that discretion is written into the code. I just can't speak to actually how it will be applied in each individual instance, but they do have discretion to do that. Yeah.
Okay, Victoria.
So my question would be, is when we're talking about the $200, is it written as up to $200?
No, that was, it was written a fine of $200, trying to get a council's direction to go lower. So the $720, actually, if we just stuck with the regular violation amount, may give more flexibility.
Yeah, but it gives flexibility to go quite a bit above that 200 as well. So I'm more comfortable with B and leaving it at the 200. That's my take.
Michelle.
I just want to share, I support draft ordinance B as well, and the fine, I think either way we go, whatever kind of consensus we reach on that is fine.
Okay.
Beth.
I'm more with the up to 720 and keeping it there, because I think we're kind of assuming a little bit someone doesn't have the means to pay based on being, just assuming because they're unhoused that they don't have those funds, and saying that if we have our fines different for different people, I think we should just keep all the same across the board.
Okay. So do you think you can try to form a motion from all of that?
Councilor Pictionary, do you want me to read it out and then to see if that helps?
I think I got it.
Okay, you got it? Okay.
We'll see.
All right.
If I mess up, holler. Stop me in my tracks.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion. Hang on a second.
Well, while you're getting that ready, right? Like, let's just make sure we all are clear where we're, like, this is directing you to draft an ordinance with all this information in it. And then we will get another sort of bite at the apple here in the next couple of weeks.
Right, so this will come back to you on June 5th for adoption. It won't be on consent. It'll be an item that I'll come up again and talk about, but we should not have as long as discussion, and it should be the final version.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve draft ordinance B, repealing and replacing Springfield Municipal Code Section 5.130 for adoption in the following manner. With a fine amount of up to $720, and adding to the place restrictions in Section 3, the multi-use pass, and adding the downtown exception area.
Okay, I don't know that Corey's going to second this, so somebody,
Second.
thank you. Neil, could you call a vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
No.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
and Counselor Picciano.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 5 yeses, 1 no.
Thank you. Last item, just to talk briefly, next steps. So adopting the ordinance, obviously, having some discussions with the court about alternative enforcement, talking about that. That's been a concern of the council to talk about that. I think I can at least get you some information about work crew and the kinds of things they do for sentencing. Vehicle regulation, looking at that this summer, providing information to you on the public feedback that we received through the survey and also through letters and emails, and then keeping the public updated through the website and kind of throughout as information goes, so we can kind of keep people informed as we work our way through this. And that'll be it.
Steve.
I understood we had to have something in place by July 1st,
Yes.
but we can still modify it after that.
Yeah, I think the way this will go is that if all goes to plan, it'll be adopted by the council by June 5th. Our ordinances take 30 days to be effective. So technically we're a little after July 5th or July 1st. It'll be like July 5th. But I think that's an okay legal risk to get the ordinance the way you want it.
Okay.
Then once, let's say we implement this ordinance, we find out maybe there's a gap or a hole or something, then you could direct me, hey, come back and look at this at another time. And we could continue to change it like we would any other municipal code section that we have.
And thank you for bringing the alternative enforcement methods. I think that's come up a couple of times, whether or not it be, additional work around the city, volunteerism, case management.
At
whatever.
least something we can
Yep.
investigate.
Yep, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other business from the city attorney?
No business.
All right. Then we are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.